Katie Morrison stood at her workstation on the bridge of the Earthship Discovery. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with long brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. At 28 years old, she was the youngest department head the ship had ever had. Most people looked at her and saw a quiet girl who spent her days looking at alien plants and bugs through a microscope. They had no idea what she was really capable of. The Discovery had been traveling through space for 6 months now. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded a crew of 300 people, all exploring the far edges of human space. They were looking for new planets, new life, and hopefully making friends with any aliens they might meet along the way. Katie was the head of the science department, which meant she studied any new life forms they found. Today started like any other day. Katie was examining samples from the last planet they had visited when the ship's alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed across the bridge as everyone rushed to their stations. "Captain, we have 20 ships approaching fast," called out Lieutenant Bobby Chen from the communications desk. "They're big, and they don't look friendly." Captain Rodriguez moved to the center of the bridge. On screen, the main display showed massive black ships that looked more like weapons than spacecraft. Each one was at least twice the size of the Discovery, covered in spikes and gun ports. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding the human ship like wolves circling prey. "Incoming transmission," Bobby announced. "Put it through." The screen flickered and showed the inside of an alien ship. Katie looked up from her tablet, fascinated despite the danger. She had never seen aliens like these before. The creature on the screen was huge, at least 8 feet tall, with dark armor that looked like it was made from the shell of some giant insect. It had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could probably tear through metal. Its head was elongated with multiple eyes and mandibles that clicked when it moved. "I am War Prime Zekthar of the Veilthak Empire," the alien announced. Its voice was deep and harsh, like grinding metal. The ship's computer translated its words into English. "This sector now belongs to us. Your species will serve as workers. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Commander Jake Sullivan, the head of security, moved to stand beside her. Both were tall, strong-looking people who had been in the military for years. "We are peaceful explorers from Earth," the captain said. "We have no quarrel with your empire. We're just passing through." War Prime Zekthar's multiple eyes scanned the bridge, taking in each human face. When his gaze fell on Katie, his mandibles clicked in what the computer translated as laughter. "This tiny thing. Is this what your species considers a warrior? How weak you must be." Katie had been quietly working on her tablet, analyzing the alien's biological data that her sensors were picking up. She looked up and met the creature's gaze calmly. "I'm not a warrior, I'm a scientist." The War Prime's laughter became louder, more harsh. "Even worse. Your species sends children and weaklings to explore space. This will be easier than we thought." Other aliens appeared behind Zekthar, all just as large and intimidating. They clicked and chittered to each other in their own language. The computer couldn't translate it all, but Katie caught words like soft, weak, and easy prey. "We have conquered 17 species across this galaxy," Zekthar continued. "Each one thought they could resist us. Each one learned that strength rules the universe. Your small females will make good breeding stock for our empire." The bridge went completely silent. Katie could feel the anger radiating from her crewmates, but she kept her face calm and neutral. She had learned long ago that showing emotion gave bullies more power over you. Captain Rodriguez's voice was ice cold. "That will never happen." "You have no choice," Zekthar replied. "Look around you. We have 20 warships. You have one small exploration vessel with minimal weapons. Surrender now and some of your people might survive." Katie stepped forward, her tablet still in her hands. She was so much smaller than everyone else on the bridge that she looked like a child among adults. "Before you make any final decisions," she said quietly, "you might want to hear what I've learned about your biology in the last few minutes." Zekthar's eyes focused on her with sudden interest. "What could a weak little female possibly tell us that we don't already know?" Katie's smile was small but confident. "Well, for starters, your exoskeleton has microscopic pores for temperature regulation. Your immune system is adapted specifically for your homeworld's environment, and your hierarchical social structure means you make decisions based on physical dominance rather than tactical intelligence. The alien war prime leaned forward on the screen. What are you getting at, small one? I'm getting at the fact that you've made several critical errors in judgment, Katie replied. You assume that size equals strength. You assume that appearance indicates capability. And most importantly, you assume that because we look peaceful, we are helpless. Zekthar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Threats from a creature I could crush. With one hand. Not threats, Katie said calmly. Just observations. You see, on Earth, the most dangerous predators are often the ones that don't look threatening until it's too late. Commander Sullivan looked at Katie with new respect. The rest of the bridge crew was watching her with growing interest. Here was their smallest, quietest officer facing down a creature that could literally tear her apart, and she wasn't backing down. You have 6 hours to prepare for surrender, Zekthar announced. After that, we will board your ship and take what we want by force. Your little scientist can use that time to think about what it means to serve the Valthak Empire. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Captain Rodriguez immediately called for a senior staff meeting. As the officers filed toward the conference room, Katie remained at her station, her fingers flying across her tablet as she analyzed every piece of data she had collected about the aliens. Commander Sullivan paused beside her. Morrison, what were you really getting at back there? Katie looked up at him, her green eyes bright with intelligence and something that might have been anticipation. I was getting at the fact that they just made the biggest mistake of their lives, Commander. They looked at me and saw weakness, but they forgot something important about humans. What's that? Katie's smile grew wider. We didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the biggest or the strongest. We became dominant by being smarter than everything that tried to eat us. The conference room buzzed with tense voices as the senior officers argued about their impossible situation. Through the large viewport, they could see the Velthak warships positioned around them like giant black sharks. Each alien vessel bristled, with weapons that could tear the Discovery apart in seconds. Commander Jake Sullivan pounded his fist on the table. We should fight our way out, surprise them with everything we've got, and make a run for it. Chief Engineer Ryan Patterson shook his head. Our engines can't outrun those ships, Jake. Even if we push them past the red line, we'd need at least 10 minutes to charge the jump drive. They'd blast us to pieces before we could escape. Dr. Amanda Foster leaned back in her chair, looking exhausted. What about diplomatic immunity? We're scientists, not soldiers. Maybe we can convince them we're not a threat. Did you see how they looked at us? Lieutenant Bobby Chen asked. They don't care about diplomacy. They see us as either slaves or target practice. Captain Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, listening to her officers debate. Her face was calm, but Katie could see the worry in her eyes. 20 warships against 1 exploration vessel. The math was simple and brutal. Katie had been quiet through most of the discussion, sitting at the far end of the table with her tablet in front of her. While the others argued, she had been analyzing every piece of data they had collected about the Valthak. Their ship scans, their biological readings, even the way they moved and spoke during the transmission. Morrison, Captain Rodriguez said, noticing her silence. You've been quiet. What's your assessment of our situation? Katie looked up from her tablet. They underestimated us because of how I look. My size, my gender, my apparent weakness. That's actually useful intelligence. Commander. Sullivan frowned. How do you figure that? The Valthak are what we call a dominance-based species, Katie explained. Their entire social structure is built around physical power. The biggest, strongest individual leads. The weak serve or die. They've used this system to conquer 17 other species over the past century. Lieutenant Chen leaned forward. So what does that tell us? It tells us they've never lost a fight, Katie replied. Every species they've encountered has either been smaller than them or less aggressive. They've never faced successful resistance because they've never needed to develop tactics beyond overwhelming force. Dr. Foster raised an eyebrow. And that helps us how? We're still outnumbered 20-1. Katie's fingers danced across her tablet, bringing up displays of biological data and ship schematics. It helps us because they're thinking like predators, who've never been challenged. They see prey, not a potential threat. That makes them predictable. Chief Engineer Patterson scratched his beard. Predictable how? They'll want to board our ship, Katie said. Taking prisoners and slaves is more valuable to them than just destroying us. They'll send a boarding party to secure the ship and process the crew, probably led by their war prime to show dominance. Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. That matches their behavior pattern. But how does that help us? Even if we know they're coming aboard, we can't fight them hand to hand. Katie smiled. And there was something sharp about the expression that made the other officers pay closer attention. Who said anything about fighting them hand to hand? She turned her tablet around so everyone could see the display. It showed detailed scans of Veilthak biology, including their nervous system, respiratory system, and the microscopic structure of their armor. I've been analyzing their physiology, Katie continued. Their exoskeletons are nearly impenetrable to energy weapons, but they have tiny pores for temperature regulation. Their immune systems are incredibly efficient, but they're adapted specifically to their homeworld environment. Commander Sullivan leaned closer to look at the data. What are you thinking, Morrison? I'm thinking that every biological system has weaknesses, Katie replied. And I'm thinking that humans have been dealing with bigger, stronger predators for millions of years. We didn't survive by being tougher than lions and bears. We survived by being smarter. Dr. Foster's eyes widened as she began to understand. You're talking about biological warfare. No, Katie said firmly. I'm talking about applied science. There's a difference between trying to kill someone and trying to level the playing field. She brought up another display showing the atmospheric composition of the Veilthak ships. They breathe a nitrogen-methane mixture that would be toxic to most Earth life. But it's perfect for what I have in mind. Captain Rodriguez studied the data carefully. What exactly do you have in mind? Katie's smile grew wider. The Veilthak think they know everything about predators and prey, but they've never encountered a species that became apex predators by outthinking their enemies instead of overpowering them. She stood up and began pacing around the table, her excitement growing as she explained her plan. They expect us to cower and surrender. They expect their boarding party to find helpless humans ready for processing. What they won't expect is for their prey to have been studying them just as carefully as they've been studying us. Lieutenant Chen looked confused. I still don't understand what you're planning to do. Katie stopped pacing and looked directly at him. I'm planning to give them exactly what they expect to see. A small, weak human female who poses no threat whatsoever. Someone so harmless they won't even bother to scan her properly. Commander Sullivan's eyes narrowed. That sounds dangerous, Morrison. What if something goes wrong? Then we're no worse off than we are right now, Katie replied. But if it works, we'll teach the Veilthak Empire something they've never learned before. Which is? Katie's expression became cold and calculating. That the most dangerous predator is often the one that doesn't look dangerous until it's too late. Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, studying the data on Katie's tablet. Finally, she looked up. What do you need from us? I need access to the chemistry lab, the medical bay, and the food processors, Katie said. I need about 4 hours to prepare, and I need 3 volunteers for what's going to look like a very stupid plan. Dr. Foster shook her head. Katie, this is incredibly risky. If they figure out what you're doing... They won't, Katie said confidently, because they've already decided I'm not worth worrying about. To them, I'm just a weak little female who studies plants and bugs. The last thing they'll expect is for me to be their biggest threat. Commander Sullivan stood up. I'll volunteer. If you're putting yourself at risk, I'm going with you. Captain Rodriguez nodded. Count me in too. What's the third position? Katie looked around the table at her fellow officers. These people had become her family over the past 6 months. They trusted her enough to follow her into what looked like certain death. I need someone who can act scared, she said. Someone the Vialthak will dismiss as completely harmless. Lieutenant Chen raised his hand. I can do scared. I've been scared since those ships showed up. Katie grinned. Perfect. Bobby, you're going to help me show the Vialthak what happens when you underestimate humans. As the meeting broke up and the officers headed to their stations, Katie remained behind with her tablet. She had work to do, and only 4 hours to do it. The Vialthak thought they were dealing with helpless prey. They were about to learn that humans had been predators long before they reached the stars. Katie worked alone in her laboratory, surrounded by equipment that hummed and beeped in the quiet darkness. The ship's night cycle had begun, but she couldn't sleep. She had less than 4 hours before the Vialthak deadline, and her plan required perfect timing and precise chemistry. On her workbench sat dozens of small containers filled with liquids and powders. To anyone else, they would look like ordinary cleaning supplies and food additives. Katie knew better. Each container held a carefully crafted compound designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Vialthak biology. She had sent requests to every department on the ship. From engineering, she needed rare metals used in circuit repairs. From medical, she needed enzyme samples and hormone regulators. From the galley, she needed food preservatives and flavor enhancers. Even the janitor had contributed cleaning chemicals that Katie was now transforming into something far more dangerous. The door to her lab slid open with a soft hiss. Captain Rodriguez stepped inside, moving quietly to avoid disturbing Katie's concentration. Morrison, it's 4 a.m. Have you slept at all? Katie didn't look up from the microscopic manufacturing unit she was programming. Tiny robots, smaller than bacteria, were assembling molecular structures according to her specifications. Sleep is for people who don't have alien invaders breathing down their necks, Captain. Rodriguez moved closer to examine Katie's work. The young scientist had transformed her laboratory into something that looked more like a weapons factory than a research facility. What exactly are you building here? Insurance, Katie replied, finally looking up from her work. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with fierce intelligence. The Vialthak have efficient immune systems, but they evolved on a world with different pathogens than Earth. Their armor can stop plasma bolts and projectile weapons, but it needs to breathe. She picked up one of the containers, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside looked like ordinary water. This contains engineered pheromones that target their neural pathways. Specifically, the parts of their brain that control aggression and coordination. Captain Rodriguez frowned. Is this some kind of poison? No, Katie said firmly. Poison would kill them. This is much more subtle. It's designed to amplify their natural behavioral patterns while disrupting their ability to work together effectively. She moved to another workstation where she was loading microscopic capsules into what looked like ordinary gift packages. The Vialthak social structure is based on dominance hierarchies. Lower-ranking individuals submit to higher-ranking ones through a complex system of chemical signals and behavioral cues. And you're planning to disrupt that system? Katie nodded. I'm planning to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Their aggression and dominance behavior will become uncontrolled. They'll lose the ability to coordinate as a unit, and their chain of command will break down. She sealed the last package and set it aside with the others. The compounds are designed to be absorbed through their respiratory system. Their armor's filtration systems will actually help distribute the chemicals throughout their bodies. Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, studying the innocent-looking packages. How do you know this will work? You've never tested it on live subjects. I've run computer simulations based on their biological data, Katie explained. The Vialthak brain structure is similar to certain Earth insects, just much larger and more complex. I know how these compounds affect those neural pathways. She pulled up a holographic display showing the molecular structure of her creations. The beauty of this approach is that it exploits their own biology against them. They won't even realize what's happening until it's too late. The captain shook her head in amazement. Where did you learn to do this kind of work? Katie's smile was tired but proud. Graduate school was very competitive. You learn to be creative when everyone else is bigger and stronger than you are. She began packing the prepared compounds into a small carrying bag. The key is that they have to underestimate me completely. If they suspect I'm a threat, they'll scan everything I'm carrying and the plan falls apart. That's what worries me, Rodriguez said. You're betting everything on their prejudices about human females. I'm betting on their arrogance, Katie corrected. They've conquered 17 species without ever facing real resistance. They don't know how to recognize a threat that doesn't look like them. She finished packing and turned to face her captain. The Valthak see physical size and aggressive behavior as the only measures of danger. They can't conceive of a threat that comes from intelligence and planning rather than brute force. Captain Rodriguez studied the young woman in front of her. Katie Morrison had always been quiet and studious, the kind of person who preferred books to parties and spent her free time analyzing alien plant samples. Now she was calmly preparing to face down creatures that could tear her apart with their bare hands. Are you sure about this, Morrison? Once you're on their ship, we won't be able to help you. Katie picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. Despite her exhaustion, her voice was steady and confident. Captain, humans have been dealing with bigger, stronger predators for millions of years. We didn't survive by fighting fair. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable and more ruthless than anything that tried to eat us. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. The Valthak think they're apex predators because they're big and strong, but they've never encountered a species that became apex predators by outthinking their enemies. As they walked toward the bridge together, Captain Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to understand that Katie Morrison might be the most dangerous person on the ship, and the aliens had no idea what they were about to face. One more question, the captain said. What happens if they figure out what you're doing? Before the compounds take effect, Katie's smile was cold and sharp. Then they'll learn that underestimating humans is a fatal mistake. But they won't figure it out, Captain, because they've already decided I'm harmless. The bridge was busy with activity as the crew prepared for the Valthak boarding party. Katie took her position near the transporter pad, looking small and vulnerable, in her simple civilian clothes. Her bag of carefully prepared compounds sat at her feet, disguised as harmless gifts. Commander Sullivan approached her, his face grim with worry. You don't have to do this, Morrison. We can find another way. Katie looked up at him, her green eyes bright with determination. There is no other way, Commander. This is what I was trained for, not fighting aliens with guns and explosions, but outsmarting them with science and strategy. She adjusted her bag and checked her tablet one final time. The Valthak are about to learn that the most dangerous human isn't necessarily the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes it's the quiet one in the corner who's been watching and learning and planning. The ship's alarm began to sound, signaling the approach of the alien boarding party. Katie took a deep breath and prepared to face the greatest challenge of her life. The transporter pad hummed with energy as 12 massive figures materialized on the Discovery's bridge. The Valthak boarding party appeared like nightmares made real, their black armor gleaming under the ship's lights. Each warrior stood over 8 feet tall, armed with weapons that crackled with deadly energy. War Prime Zekthar stepped forward first, his multiple eyes scanning the assembled humans with obvious satisfaction. Behind him, 11 other Valthak warriors formed a semicircle, their mandibles clicking in what sounded like hungry anticipation. Captain Rodriguez stood at attention with Commander Sullivan beside her. They looked calm and professional, but Katie could see the tension in their shoulders. Near the back of the group, Lieutenant Bobby Chen was doing an excellent job of looking terrified. Katie herself had changed into a simple blue dress that made her look even smaller than usual. She carried her bag of prepared compounds and kept her eyes downcast, playing the role of a frightened civilian. To the Valthak, she probably looked like easy prey. Humans, Zekthar announced, his voice booming through the ship's translation. System, you have made the wise choice to surrender. Your ship now belongs to the Valthak Empire. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. War Prime, as agreed, we surrender our vessel. This is Dr. Katie Morrison, our head of science. She has volunteered to serve as a cultural liaison between our species. Zekthar's attention focused on Katie. She could feel his multiple eyes studying her, taking in her small size and apparently submissive posture. His mandibles clicked with what the computer translated as amusement. "This tiny female thinks she can speak for your species?" Zekthar asked. "How pathetic your people must be to send such a weak creature as a representative." Katie stepped forward, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "War Prime, I have prepared gifts for you and your warriors, small tokens of respect from our people to yours." She opened her bag and began removing what appeared to be simple food and drink containers. Each package was beautifully wrapped and looked completely harmless. The Valthak warriors watched with bored interest as she distributed the gifts. "These are samples of our finest foods and beverages," Katie said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We hope they please you." The Valthak warriors accepted the packages without concern. Their armor's built-in systems would protect them from any crude human toxins. They had conquered too many worlds to worry about primitive chemical weapons. One of the younger warriors opened his package immediately and began consuming the contents. Others followed suit, their confidence absolute. After all, what could a small human female possibly do to mighty Valthak warriors? Katie continued distributing her gifts, moving among the boarding party with apparent nervousness. To the aliens, she looked like exactly what they expected, a weak, frightened female, trying to curry favor with her new masters. "You show proper submission, little human," Zekthar said approvingly. "Perhaps your species can be trained after all." Katie nodded meekly. "We only wish to serve, War Prime. I have studied your people's great achievements across the galaxy. Your strength and wisdom are legendary." The flattery pleased Zekthar just as Katie had hoped it would. Dominant species always enjoyed having their superiority acknowledged by those they considered inferior. What the Valthak didn't notice was the subtle change beginning to occur in their body language. The compounds Katie had engineered were designed to be absorbed through their respiratory systems, and their armor's filtration systems were actually helping to distribute the chemicals throughout their bodies. The first warrior to consume Katie's gift began shifting his weight from foot to foot. His head movements became more rapid, and his mandibles clicked in an irregular pattern. The change was slight, but Katie recognized the signs immediately. "War Prime," she said, still maintaining her submissive pose. "Might I ask about the glorious battles your warriors have fought? Their reputation for courage is known throughout this sector." Zekthar puffed up with pride, exactly as Katie had predicted. "We have crushed 17 species beneath our claws. Each one thought they could resist the might of the Valthak Empire." More of the warriors were beginning to show subtle signs of agitation. Their natural aggression hormones were being amplified by Katie's compounds, while their ability to process social hierarchy signals was being disrupted. The careful discipline that held their unit together was starting to crack. "Tell me about your greatest victory," Katie prompted, her voice full of apparent admiration. As Zekthar launched into a boastful account of past conquests, Katie watched his warriors with growing satisfaction. The compounds were working exactly as she had designed them. The Valthak's own biology was turning against them. One of the younger warriors suddenly growled at another, their natural dominance displays becoming exaggerated and hostile. The second warrior growled back, his posture becoming more aggressive. Zekthar noticed the disturbance and turned to reprimand his subordinates, but his own movements were becoming less coordinated. The neural pathways that controlled his leadership behavior were being flooded with conflicting chemical signals. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice losing some of its commanding authority. Katie looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Is something wrong, War Prime? You seem disturbed." The breakdown was accelerating now. More warriors were showing signs of confusion and aggression. Their careful formation was dissolving as individual Valthak began challenging each other for dominance. The social bonds that held their unit together were disintegrating under the influence of Katie's engineered compounds. "Impossible," Zekthar snarled, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. "What have you done, human female?" Katie straightened slowly, her demeanor shifting from submissive to coolly analytical. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Where moments before she had appeared frightened and helpless, now she looked like a scientist observing the results of a successful experiment. I've introduced a neurochemical compound that exploits specific vulnerabilities in your species' neural architecture, she said calmly. You're experiencing amplified aggression responses combined with disrupted social hierarchy recognition. Zekthar stared at her, his multiple eyes struggling to focus. You are just a weak female. Katie's smile was small but sharp. That's your first mistake, War Prime. You assume that physical size and aggressive behavior are the only measures of threat capability. Around them, the Velthak boarding party was descending into chaos. Warriors who had worked together for years were now snarling at each other, their chain of command completely broken. The compounds had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Your second mistake, Katie continued, was assuming that because humans appear peaceful, we are helpless. You forgot that we became the dominant species on our world, not by being the biggest or the strongest, but by being smarter than everything that tried to kill us. Zekthar tried to raise his weapon, but his coordination was too compromised. His warriors were too busy fighting each other to follow orders. The mighty Velthak boarding party had been reduced to a collection of confused, aggressive individuals who could barely stand upright. Katie pulled out her tablet and began recording data on the compound's effectiveness. The effects will last approximately 6 hours, she announced. No permanent damage, just temporary disruption of your neural chemistry. She looked directly at Zekthar, her green eyes bright with intelligence and something that might have been pity. You should have remembered, War Prime, that the most dangerous predators don't always look dangerous until it's too late. The chaos spread through the Velthak fleet faster than their commanders could understand what was happening. The boarding party members who had returned to their ships carried Katie's compounds with them, and the alien ventilation systems did exactly what she had predicted they would do. Within 2 hours, 20 massive warships found themselves dealing with crews who could barely remember their own names. Katie stood on the Discovery's bridge, watching the alien fleet through the main viewport. Several of the Velthak ships were drifting aimlessly, their crews too confused to maintain proper formation. Others were sending random signals to each other, their communication breaking down as officers forgot how to follow orders. Captain Rodriguez joined her at the viewport. I've never seen anything like this. Their entire fleet is falling apart. The compounds work by disrupting the chemical signals that maintain their social structure, Katie explained. Without those signals, they lose the ability to function. As a coordinated unit, each individual becomes focused only on their own immediate dominance displays. Commander Sullivan approached from the communications station. Morrison, we're receiving dozens of signals from their ships. It sounds like they're all arguing with each other. Katie nodded. That's exactly what should be happening. Their natural aggression is being amplified while their ability to recognize authority is being suppressed. Every warrior thinks they should be in charge. Lieutenant Bobby Chen looked up from his console. Should we try to escape while they're distracted? Not yet, Katie replied. I want to make sure they understand what happened here. She moved to the communications console and opened a channel to the entire Velthak fleet. Her image appeared on screens throughout 20 warships, where confused and agitated aliens struggled to focus on her small human face. This is Dr. Catherine Morrison of the United Earthship Discovery, she announced. I am speaking to all Velthak vessels in this sector. War Prime Zekthar's face appeared on the main screen, his multiple eyes unfocused and his movements unsteady. Several other Velthak commanders tried to push into the frame, all talking at once in their clicking language. Impossible, Zekthar managed to say. How did a weak female defeat our warriors? Katie's voice remained calm and professional. You made 3 critical errors in your assessment of humanity, War Prime. First, you assumed that physical size indicates capability. Second, you assumed that gender determines competence. Third, and most importantly, you assumed that because we appeared peaceful, we were helpless. She gestured to her tablet, where displays showed the real-time status of each Velthak ship. Crew efficiency was down to almost 0 across the entire fleet. Your crews are experiencing temporary neurological disruption. The effects will fade completely within 6 hours, leaving no permanent damage. Other Velthak commanders were trying to interrupt, but their coordination was too poor to mount any kind of organized response. Katie continued speaking, her words reaching every alien in the fleet. Consider this a demonstration of human capabilities, she said. We are not the weak prey species you believed us to be. Captain Rodriguez stepped beside Katie. War Prime Zekthar, you have a choice. You can withdraw from this sector immediately and never return, or Dr. Morrison can demonstrate some of humanity's less gentle scientific achievements. Zekthar struggled to focus his eyes on the human captain. This is treachery. You fought with poison instead of weapons. Katie shook her head. This is evolution, War Prime. For 4 billion years, life on Earth has been shaped by predation, adaptation, and survival. We are apex predators on our world, but we became dominant by outthinking our enemies rather than overpowering them. She pulled up another display showing Earth's history. Images of humans hunting creatures 10 times their size, building tools, developing agriculture, and eventually reaching the stars. Every species you have conquered before relied on strength or numbers for survival. Humans relied on intelligence. Lieutenant Chen reported from his station. Ma'am, the Velthak fleet is attempting to form up, but their coordination is completely broken. Several ships are moving in random directions. Katie nodded. They're trying to retreat, but their crews can't work together effectively. War Prime Zekthar's image flickered as his ship's systems struggled with the confused crew. You cannot have defeated the mighty Velthak Empire. We have conquered 17 worlds. You conquered 17 species that fought the way you expected them to fight, Katie corrected, with claws and teeth and brute force. But humans learned long ago that the best way to deal with a bigger, stronger predator is to make it defeat itself. She gestured to the chaos visible through the viewports. Your own biology is working against you now. Your aggression, your dominance, behavior, your need to establish hierarchy. All of it turned into weapons that I designed specifically for your species. Dr. Amanda Foster joined the group on the bridge. Katie, how did you know this would work so well? Katie smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, she looked like the young scientist she really was. Because bullies are predictable, no matter what species they are. They always underestimate their victims, and they always assume that their way of fighting is the only way that matters. The main screen showed War Prime Zekthar struggling to maintain control of his ship. Other Velthak commanders were visible in the background, all arguing and pushing each other in displays of confused dominance. This is impossible, Zekthar repeated. How can a species of weak creatures defeat the Velthak? Katie's expression became serious again. We're not weak, War Prime. We're different. You see physical strength as the only measure of power, but humans learned to value intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Those traits made us survivors long before we reached the stars, Commander Sullivan reported from his station. The alien fleet is beginning to withdraw. They're moving slowly, but they're definitely leaving the sector. Katie watched the massive warships lumber away, their crews still struggling with the effects of her compounds. Good. They'll recover completely in a few hours, but hopefully, they'll remember this lesson. Captain Rodriguez placed a hand on Katie's shoulder. Outstanding work, Morrison. How does it feel to have defeated an entire alien fleet without firing a single shot? Katie looked out at the stars where the Velthak ships were disappearing into the distance. It feels like I did what humans have always done, Captain. I adapted to survive. She picked up her tablet and began making notes about the encounter. The Velthak will spread word about what happened here. Other aggressive species will hear about the small human female who defeated their mighty empire. Lieutenant Chen grinned. What do you think they'll call you? Katie's smile was quiet but confident. They'll call it the Morrison Protocol, the dangerous human tendency to turn apparent weakness into devastating strength. As the Discovery resumed its peaceful exploration mission, Katie returned to her laboratory. She had proven something important today, not just to the aliens but to herself. Humans didn't need to be the biggest or the strongest to survive in a hostile universe. They just needed to be smarter than everything that tried to hurt them. Sincho, the depths of space. Word began to spread among alien species about the humans and their deceptively fragile-looking female who had single-handedly defeated the mighty Velthak Empire. They would remember that the most dangerous humans were often the ones who looked harmless until it was too late. And in her quiet laboratory aboard the Discovery, Katie Morrison continued her research, knowing that the universe was full of bullies who had yet to learn that humans should never be underestimated.